Okay, so you want to own a supermarket. Buy food cheap from the people who grow it and make it, stack it on shelves, mark it up, and let an entire town walk through your doors every single week and hand you money for things they cannot live without. It's the most reliable demand on earth. People stop buying cars, they stop buying furniture, they stop taking vacations, they never stop eating. You picture the parking lot full on a Saturday morning, 20 registers beeping, carts stacked with $200 of groceries each, the produce misted and glowing under the lights. You picture a business that can't go out of style, can't be disrupted, can't be talked out of existing. Food. Forever. Here's the strange part. Almost none of the money in that building comes from selling food, and the people who own supermarkets know it, which is why they spend most of their week thinking about things that have nothing to do with groceries at all. Let's start with what you think you're buying. You think you're buying a store. What you're actually buying is a very large, very cold, very expensive machine that moves physical objects from a truck to a car trunk. And the entire question of whether you make money is a question about how efficiently that machine runs, not about what's inside it. Start with the price of admission. A conventional supermarket in the United States is somewhere between 40,000 and 60,000 square feet. If you build one from the ground up, you're looking at construction costs that land somewhere between $8 and $15 million for the building and site work, before you put a single can on a shelf. Then you have to fill it. A store that size carries somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 to 40,000 individual items. And the wholesale value of that inventory sitting on the floor and in the back room is commonly $1.5 to $2.5 million. So before you open the doors, before you sell a single banana, you have committed something like $10 to $18 million. Most people don't do that. Most people buy an existing store, and here's where the first number should make you uncomfortable. Independent supermarkets change hands at roughly 3 to 5 times annual operating earnings. Not revenue, earnings. And that multiple is low for a reason. A business trades at a low multiple when the market believes its earnings are fragile. Restaurants trade low. Supermarkets trade low. Software trades high. The multiple is the market's honest opinion about how confident it is that next year looks like this year. So let's build the store. Let's say you buy a solid neighborhood supermarket doing $30 million a year in sales. That's a real store. That's roughly $575,000 a week through the registers, which means somewhere around 12,000 to 15,000 customer transactions a week at an average basket in the 40s. That's a busy, healthy, respected store in a town that likes it. Now watch what happens to that $30 million. Your gross margin on groceries, the difference between what you paid for the item and what the customer paid you, runs around 26 to 28% in a conventional supermarket. Call it 27. That's $8.1 million of gross profit on $30 million of sales. Sounds like an enormous amount of money. It is about to disappear in front of you. Labor is the biggest bite. A supermarket is not a self-running vending machine. You have cashiers, baggers, stockers who work overnight, produce clerks who trim and rotate, meat cutters who are skilled tradespeople and paid like it, deli staff, bakery staff, receiving, bookkeeping, and a management layer. A store that size runs somewhere between 100 and 150 employees, most part-time. Total payroll with taxes and benefits typically lands between 11 and 13% of sales. On $30 million, that's roughly $3.6 million a year walking out the door in wages. Occupancy is next. If you lease, a supermarket box in a decent shopping center runs maybe $12 to $20 per square foot per year. On a 50,000 square foot store, that's $600,000 to $1 million in rent, plus common area maintenance and property taxes on top of it. Call it $900,000 all in. Then electricity. And this is the line nobody outside the industry ever thinks about. A supermarket is a refrigerator that happens to have a roof and a parking lot. Refrigeration and the lighting inside the cases account for well over half of a store's power consumption, and it never turns off. Not at night, not on Christmas, not when the store is empty. Your open dairy case is a machine that cools the air of the entire aisle in front of it, 24 hours a day, forever. A store that size burns through $200,000 to $350,000 a year in utilities, depending on your state's power prices. And when the compressor rack on the roof fails, and it will, that's an $80,000 repair that has to happen tonight, because in 6 hours, you're throwing away the entire frozen section. Then, shrink. Shrink is the industry's word for product that came in the back door and never made it through a register. Some of it is theft. Most of it isn't. Most of it is a case of strawberries that turned, a rotisserie chicken that sat past its hold time, a yogurt that hit its date, a dented can, a bag of ice that melted because a door seal failed. Shrink runs between 2 and 3% of sales in a well-run store. On $30 million, that's $600,000 to $900,000 a year of food that you bought, paid for, handled, refrigerated, and then threw in a compactor. Read that again, because it's the sentence that separates groceries from every other retail business. In a clothing store, unsold inventory is a markdown. In a supermarket, unsold inventory is garbage. Your merchandise is actively decomposing while it waits for a customer. You are running a business whose inventory has a heartbeat and a deadline. Add credit card processing, which, on $30 million of card-heavy transactions, costs you $300,000 to $500,000 a year, a number that exceeds the total profit of many small businesses and buys you absolutely nothing. Add insurance, add repairs and maintenance, add advertising, add trash and recycling, and the pallet jacks, and the floor scrubber, and the uniform service, and the pest contract, and the scale calibration, and the fire suppression inspection. Run the arithmetic to the bottom, and here is what a genuinely good, well-managed, $30 million independent supermarket earns in a year. Somewhere between 1.5% and 3%. Call it 2. $600,000. Sit with the shape of that. You employ 130 people. You handle $30 million of other people's money. You take on $10 million in inventory, equipment, and lease obligations. You are personally responsible for the food safety of an entire neighborhood. And your reward for a good year is $600,000, out of which you still have to service the debt you took on to buy the place. Now here's the part that reframes everything. A 2% net margin means that a 2% swing in anything wipes you out completely. If your labor cost rises by 2 points, you earn nothing. If shrink goes from 2% to 4%, you earn nothing. If a competitor opens across the street and takes 7% of your sales, you don't lose 7% of your profit, you lose all of it. Because the rent, the power, the refrigeration, and most of the labor don't shrink when your sales do. That's the real physics of this business. Your costs are almost entirely fixed, and your margin is almost entirely thin, which means every dollar of sales above your break-even point is nearly pure profit, and every dollar below it is nearly pure loss. Supermarkets don't decline gently. They're fine, and then they're fine, and then they're gone. So how does anyone make money here? Here's where it gets interesting, because the answer is that the supermarket stopped being in the business of selling you food a long time ago. It's in 3 other businesses simultaneously, and it uses the food to run them. Start with the first one. The store is not one business. It's a bundle of businesses with wildly different economics, and only some of them are worth anything. Center store, the aisles, the packaged goods, the cereal and soda and paper towels and canned soup is where most of your inventory investment sits and where your worst margins live. Those items are nationally advertised, universally available, and priced in the customer's head. A box of a famous cereal brand is a commodity that you and the store 4 miles away, and the warehouse club and the online retailer all sell. You make 15 to 20 points on it, and you make less than that on the ones people actually track. And that word track hides a rule that governs your entire pricing strategy. A shopper carrying 35,000 items worth of choice does not know what most of it costs. What that shopper knows precisely is the price of about 100 things. Milk, eggs, bananas, bread, a 12-pack of the soda they drink, ground beef, the brand of coffee they buy every week. Those are known value items, and their prices are stored in a customer's head with startling accuracy because they're bought every single trip. That 100-item list is your reputation. If your milk is 40 cents above the store across town, your customer concludes that your entire store is expensive, all 35,000 items of it, and adjusts where they shop for everything. So you price those 100 items at or below cost, permanently, as a form of advertising, and you make your money on the 34,900 items nobody is measuring. That's the trade at the heart of grocery retail, and it's worth saying plainly. You are priced on 100 items and paid on 35,000, which also means your pricing power is not set by your costs. It's set by whichever operator in your town is willing to lose the most money on eggs. Now go to the perimeter. Produce, meat, deli, bakery, prepared foods, floral. Gross margins there run 35 to 55%. The reason is simple. Nobody knows what a pound of prepared chicken salad is supposed to cost. There's no national advertised price for your bakery's sourdough. You cut it, you cook it, you wrap it, you price it. You have converted a commodity into something the customer can't comparison shop, and the reward for that conversion is 20 to 30 extra points of margin. That's why every supermarket built in the last 20 years pushes you around the outside walls. That's why the flowers and the fruit are at the entrance, and the milk is at the furthest possible corner from the door. The layout of a supermarket isn't decoration, and it isn't tradition. It's a margin map. The walk from the door to the milk is designed to route you past every high-margin department in the building, and the length of that walk is worth real money. So a good operator isn't trying to sell more groceries. A good operator is trying to shift the mix. Move the perimeter from 32% of sales to 38% of sales, and you have moved your gross margin by more than a point. And on a 2% net margin, a point of gross is a 50% increase in your profit. Same customers, same store, same building, different mix. Now the second business, and this is the one nobody outside the trade understands. Your suppliers pay you, not in the loose sense that you buy from them at a discount. In the literal sense, money flows from the manufacturer to the retailer as a separate revenue stream, and it is enormous. When a food company launches a new product, it pays a supermarket chain for the right to occupy a slot on the shelf. That's a slotting fee, and depending on the chain and the category, it can run into thousands of dollars per item per store. On top of that, there are promotional allowances. The manufacturer pays you to feature the item in your weekly ad, to build an end cap display, to put it in the front of the store, to drop the price for 2 weeks. There are volume rebates that pay out when you hit purchase targets. There are backhaul allowances when your own trucks pick up the freight instead of theirs. Understand what this means about the nature of the business. You have been thinking of yourself as a merchant who buys goods and resells them. You are also a landlord. You own roughly 4 acres of shelf space in a location where 12,000 households a week physically walk past it, and that shelf space is the single most contested real estate in consumer products. The food manufacturer isn't just selling to you. The food manufacturer is renting from you. And here's the trap almost nobody sees coming. Those payments scale with size, not with skill. A chain with 400 stores negotiates trade support that an operator with 1 store cannot get at any price. Because the manufacturer isn't paying for your excellence, it's paying for reach. 2 stores, no matter how beautifully run, don't buy the manufacturer anything. That's the mechanism that has quietly killed independent grocers for 40 years. It isn't that the big chain is smarter, it's that the big chain gets paid more for selling the identical box of cereal at the identical price, and it can therefore charge less for it while earning more on it. Which brings us to the third business, and this is the modern one, the one that has rearranged the entire industry in the last decade. You are sitting on the most valuable purchase data in the economy. A supermarket knows what a household eats, how often, in what quantity, whether it has children, whether someone in it is pregnant, diabetic, observant, dieting, or drinking. It knows this weekly, for years, tied to a loyalty card. Nobody else has that. A car dealer sees you once every 6 years. A bank sees a number without a story. You see the actual composition of a family's life, 52 times a year. The large chains figured out what that was worth. Kroger built a data science operation that sells insight and advertising back to the very manufacturers whose products it stocks. Walmart built an advertising business inside its own retail operation that now generates billions of dollars a year. And here's the number that matters. That advertising revenue carries margins in the neighborhood of 70%, against a retail operation earning 2 or 3. A single dollar of advertising revenue is worth $25 of grocery revenue at the bottom line. That's the actual answer to why anyone owns supermarkets at scale. The groceries generate the traffic generates the data. The data is sold to the manufacturers, and the profit is made in a business that requires no refrigeration, no trucks, no shrink, and no employees standing on a concrete floor at 4 in the morning. Now, here's the other side of the ledger, the part that makes the whole thing survivable while you wait. You get to use other people's money for free. A supermarket sells its inventory in roughly 2 weeks. Fresh departments turn far faster than that. Produce and dairy move in days. But you pay your suppliers on terms, commonly 21 to 30 days, which means you sell the milk, collect the cash, hold it, and pay for the milk 2 weeks later. Every day you're open, you're holding a float of $1 million or more that legally belongs to the people who supplied you. This is called negative working capital, and it's one of the great hidden engines of retail. It means growth funds itself. Open a new store, and it fills with inventory you haven't paid for yet, generating cash before the first invoice comes due. You can expand into new markets on a river of supplier money. And it is the single most dangerous feature of the business. Because a company that is quietly losing money on operations can look magnificent on cash flow for years. Cash is coming in every day. The registers never stop. The bank balance is fat. It feels like success. What's actually happening is that each new store injects a fresh slug of float that papers over the losses of the old ones, and the whole structure only works while you're still opening stores. The day you stop expanding, the float stops growing, and the underlying arithmetic arrives all at once, with several years of interest attached. That's not theory. That's the obituary of the American grocery industry. A&P was once the largest retailer in the world, a company so dominant that Congress held hearings about it. It filed for bankruptcy in 2010, came out, and liquidated entirely in 2015. Winn-Dixie, Marsh, Fairway in New York, Earth Fare, Lucky's Market, Tops, Southeastern Grocers, chains that were institutions in their regions. And that went down not because customers stopped eating, but because a 2% margin business had been financed like a 20% margin business. Which brings us to how a supermarket actually dies, because it almost never looks the way you'd expect. It doesn't die from a bad year. It dies from 1.4 miles away. A hard discounter opens a small store nearby. It carries about 2,000 items instead of your 35,000, and roughly 90% of them are its own private label. That single fact changes everything about its cost structure. It doesn't need the manufacturer's brand, so it doesn't pay the manufacturer's price. It stocks 1 size of ketchup instead of 9, so its shelves restock in a fraction of the labor hours. Its cases are cardboard cutouts placed directly on the shelf, so a truck unloads into the sales floor without anyone touching an individual can. It employs 1/4 of the people per dollar of sales that you do. That store doesn't have to beat you. It just has to take 8% of your customers' weekly spending, the paper towels, the eggs, the pasta, the boring items where you were making very little anyway. Your sales go from 30 million to 27.6 million. Your rent doesn't move. Your power bill doesn't move. Your refrigeration runs at exactly the same cost, cooling slightly emptier cases. Your management payroll doesn't move. Your $600,000 of profit becomes negative $200,000. You didn't lose the fight. You lost 8% of a business whose entire profit lived in the last 8%. And you cannot cut your way back, because every cost in this store is visible to the shopper. Reduce your labor hours, and the shelves have holes in them on Saturday afternoon, which is precisely when the largest baskets are being filled. Cut the bakery to save payroll, and you have removed a 50% margin department and the smell that pulls people through the door. Stop replacing the coolers, and your energy costs rise while your produce looks worse. Every lever available to you in a crisis makes the store slightly less pleasant to shop, and a slightly less pleasant store loses another 2% of trips. And 2% of trips is the rest of your profit. There's a second trap sitting on top of that one, and it's newer. Somebody else now owns the moment your customer decides. Third-party delivery platforms took a business with a 2% margin and inserted a partner who takes 15 to 30% of the order value in fees and commissions. Understand what that does arithmetically. A delivery order at those economics isn't lower margin, it's negative. Unless you raise your shelf prices inside the app, which the platforms permit and shoppers have largely accepted, you are paying for the privilege of servicing your own customer. And it's worse than a fee, because it's a relationship transfer. The household that used to walk your aisles, notice the end cap, smell the rotisserie chickens, and leave with $60 of unplanned purchases now types the 11 items it always buys into a phone. Every impulse purchase in your store, and impulse is a meaningful share of a full basket, is deleted from that transaction. You have kept the volume and lost the mix, which is the same as losing the profit. So you build your own app to avoid the fee, and now you discover the other half of the problem. Someone still has to physically walk your store and pick those 11 items off your shelves. That's a paid human, in your building, on your clock, for 20 to 30 minutes, generating exactly one transaction. Online grocery orders are picked by a person almost everywhere, and picking a basket costs somewhere in the range of $6 to $15 in labor. On an $80 order carrying $2 of profit. There is a version of this business that solves that, a dedicated automated fulfillment facility that picks orders by machine. It costs tens of millions of dollars and only makes sense across an entire metropolitan area's volume. Which brings us back to the same wall you hit with slotting fees, with private label, with data, with everything. Density. In this industry, market share inside one metro area is the whole ballgame. 15 stores in one city can share a distribution center, run one ad campaign against one media market, negotiate as a real customer, and build automation. 15 stores scattered across 5 states have the costs of a chain and the buying power of nothing. Which finally explains the thing that confuses everyone watching this industry from outside. Why supermarket companies are so obsessed with buying each other, and why regulators keep blocking them from doing it. When the 2 largest conventional chains in America tried to merge and a federal court stopped them in late 2024, that wasn't a fight about groceries. It was a fight about density, about whether the combined company would have enough share in enough individual cities to change what it pays and what it charges. And underneath all of it, there's one more asset you may have failed to notice you own: the dirt. A supermarket is the anchor of a shopping center. It generates the weekly traffic that every other tenant in that center, the nail salon, the pharmacy, the bank branch, the taco place, is actually paying rent for. If you own the real estate under your store, your building has 2 separate values: what it earns selling food and what the land is worth to somebody who wants a location where 12,000 households come every week without being advertised to. Frequently, the land is worth more than the business. This is why so many grocery chains have been bought by financial owners, stripped of their real estate through sale-leaseback transactions, and handed back a store that now pays rent on property it used to own. The buyer gets a check today. The store gets a permanent new fixed cost forever, on the exact line item it can least afford, in a business with a 2% margin. Every one of those deals converts a durable operating business into a fragile one, and several of the bankruptcies in that list earlier began the day the real estate left the building. So let's go back to that Saturday morning parking lot. Everything in that scene is real. The demand is real. People genuinely will not stop eating. The traffic is real. The $30 million is real. What's false is the assumption that any of it belongs to you. You handle enormous quantities of money, and you retain almost none of it, because you are operating in the narrowest gap in commerce, between what the world's largest food manufacturers will charge you and what the world's most price-aware customer will pay you. The winners in this business never tried to widen that gap by selling groceries better. They widened it by changing what they were selling. They sold shelf position to manufacturers. They sold their own private label at double the margin of the brand next to it. They sold prepared food nobody can price check. They sold advertising to the very companies whose products lined their aisles. They sold the parking lot's traffic to every neighboring tenant. They sold, in the end, the attention of an entire town, gathered weekly, reliably, at a location everyone already knows how to find. The food was never the product. The food was the reason everyone showed up. If you buy a supermarket, understand what you are actually buying. You are not buying a store that sells groceries. You are buying the last building in America that an entire community still walks into every single week. And the only question that determines whether you get rich or get liquidated is whether you know how to sell that fact to somebody other than the person pushing the cart.